Okay, welcome back, folks. Final segment of the Nick and Joe Show. I'm Nick, he's Joe, and we're located in the heart of the country's capital region, near the city of Ottawa, and it's the best doggone conservative talk show in the country. Ain't that right, Joseph?
Why not the world?
Today, the country, tomorrow, the world. What was that show, cartoon, Pinky and the Brain? What do we do tonight, Brain? Same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
I missed that one, Nick. That was not one of the shows that I would watch.
Oh, it was classic. I got such a kick out of that show.
Okay.
Because the question is, who's who?
I'm not going there, Nick. I'm not going there.
Just asking. Anyway. So in the international front, there's been some stuff. Believe it or not, the world didn't stop turning. There are other issues besides clamping a mask over your face and trying to pretend like you know what's going on and that's going to keep you safe, such as this latest flare-up between Israel and Iran, centered in Syria. According to this article I'm looking at now from, where are you from? Haaretz News, I think is what it's called.
Haaretz. Haaretz.
What's that?
Haaretz.
Haaretz?
Haaretz.
Oh, there's a pause between the two A's.
Yes.
Okay. This is the first paragraph. The Iranian plan to launch a swarm of killer drones toward Israeli targets from Syria, which was foiled by the Israeli Defense Forces on Saturday night, was not exactly unprecedented. In the last 19 months, there have been at least 4 attempts by Iran or militias working on its behalf to launch either attack drones or missiles toward Israel, starting with the UAV shot down by an Israeli Apache helicopter moments after it crossed the border in February of 2018. And it goes on, but it begs the question, like, on one hand, historically, it's pretty easy to figure out what Iran's doing. They're a country run by people with a sense of manifest destiny. They hate Israel for no other reason than they're Israelis, and they want to wipe them off the face of the earth. And that, in a nutshell, is the reason. Now, why they're trying to do it this way now is probably the topic for debate.
Well, so just a little bit of recent news.
Nuance?
And just to correct you on one small point, Nick, these guys in Iran, and not the Iranian people per se, but the mullahs, the government in Iran, which I don't think is very reflective of the general attitude on the ground. The Iranian people,
I don't either.
The Iranian people are actually, and perhaps even ironically, probably the most pro-Western people in the Middle East. And just to make sure that people know this, they're not Arabs, they're Persian. So it's a different ethnic group altogether. And they don't speak Arabic in Iran, they speak Persian and a number of other mix of other languages. But the Ayatollahs, the mullahs who are running the show over there, are anti-Israel, not because they hate Israelis, but because they hate Jews, and Israel is a Jewish state. So they're very anti-Semitic. And this proxy war has been going on between Israel and Iran for some time now, and it's been much more intensified over the course of the last few years with the breakdown of order in Syria and the ability now of the Iranians to position themselves in Syria to station their own proxies, groups, and in fact their own Iranian soldiers in Syria in order to carry out attacks against Israel. And the Israelis, of course, have either thwarted such attacks or have preempted them from time to time. But lately, it's morphed into more than just the proxy war in Syria and around Syria, in Lebanon also. where Hezbollah is very much the in charge, if you will, of South Syria, and is an Iranian proxy. But what's morphed in the course of the past couple of months is that the Iranian have been engaged in more of a naval there, and the Israelis as well. That's been sort of tit for tat naval operations. In other words, attacking surreptitiously, if possible, one another's marine or maritime assets. So far, nobody's actually attacked an actual naval warship, but I think it's probably a matter of time before somebody crosses that red line. The other thing that's happened recently is that as the Iranians have been pursuing nuclear capability, and the Israelis have been taking steps to try to prevent that from happening, and there have been some acts of sabotage, some assassinations that have been attributed to Israel of high-ranking nuclear scientists and officials in Iran's nuclear program. And then just a few days ago, there was an act of sabotage in Iran's main nuclear facility, which is underground, and they were just beginning to bring online centrifuges for enrichment of uranium to higher levels than is part of the agreement that they signed. And as they were bringing these online, I am told that there was a large explosion in the underground facility that essentially took out all of the electrical power to the facility and has set them back now by perhaps as long as a year in order to repair the damage and bring these centrifuges back online. So now the Iranian government has blamed Israel, and I think the consensus is that it was Israeli agents that somehow managed to carry this out. And the Iranian government is vowing revenge. So there you have it. Will it heat up? I don't know, but I can tell you one thing that the Iranians have done that no American president and no Western country and no United Nations or no peace plan and peace proposals have brought about, and that is the alliance of Israel with a number of her Arab neighbors. Because countries like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Jordan, etc., are not allies, not friends of the Ayatollahs in Iran. And so they perceive Iran to be their own strategic threat. And the consequence of this is that many of these Arab governments have, for a few years now, been collaborating under the table with Israel. And under the Trump administration, the Trump administration succeeded in pushing some of these Arab governments to make official what they were doing unofficially anyway. And that was working closely hand in hand with the Israeli government in an effort to contain the Iranian government. So that's it in a nutshell, and it remains to be seen. I don't actually expect the fighting to get too hot. I don't think it's in anyone's interest, and one thing that Israel and other countries in the Middle East have learned over the years is to be very circumspect when it comes to launching real, serious military action, because you end up fighting, either finding yourself in a stalemate, or you find yourself not being able to follow through because of all of the complexities of international diplomacy. Like, for instance, I remember in 1973, going back a few years now, when the Israeli army, having recovered from the shock of the surprise attack on them, on what's come to be known as the Yom Kippur War in 73, after having survived the initial onslaught, pushing back, for instance, Syrian forces back across the Syrian border and into Syria, and then the Americans having to step in and say to the Israelis, okay, stop, you're not going to go all the way to Damascus, which, by the way, because we made the mention of the immense size of Canada, is Canadians have very little concept of how little space there is in and between countries in the Middle East, and Damascus is about 30 some kilometers away from the Israel-Syrian border in the Golan area, so it's not a big distance to cover. You're talking 20 minutes drive on a highway, 15 minutes drive. So the distances that you have to travel from country to country and from capital city to capital city are really not that great. So that's the Israeli situation. I don't expect things to heat up there very much, but the other thing you can't do very accurately in the Middle East is really predict with any kind of security what's going to happen and not happen. But Israel is not the only hot place in the international community right now. Something that's there's been this ongoing brewing conflict for as long as I can remember, potential conflict, the confrontation between mainland China, the Chinese communists, and Taiwan, which is it used to be Chinese territory, and they still call it Chinese territory, but Taiwan is a break-off segment from China, made up of primarily the descendants of those people who were defeated by the communists in the 1949-1950 communist revolution. So, the forces of Chiang Kai-shek crossed over to Formosa, as it was known then. Now it's known as Taiwan. And the communist government has never recognized the independence of Taiwan. And, of course, nobody wants to go to war with China, so the international community has been very reluctant to grant Taiwan full recognition and full diplomatic recognition, along with all the things that come up with it, because they don't want to provoke the Chinese. But in recent years, China's been very aggressive, more so than they traditionally have been. They've built up a very strong, powerful navy, which is a very new development, and they've been very, as I say, aggressive in intimidating or attempting to intimidate not just Taiwan but other countries in Southeast Asia, predominantly maritime countries. So that's an ongoing issue, and every now and then tensions rise, as they have in the recent weeks, because the Taiwanese are asserting themselves, and every time Taiwan asserts itself, you can expect a reaction from Beijing.
Right.
So, and then what's sort of cropped up, that is taking everybody a bit by surprise, and that is the sudden, by all appearances, potential escalation of the conflict that's been going on at a low level between Russia and Ukraine, and to the point where the Russians now apparently